Hello, everyone. Welcome to CST 201, Establishing Financial Governance on GCP. I'm Phillip Coletti. I'm a product manager on the cloud billing team, and I work on cost management features. Today with me, co-presenting is Aurelie Fonteny, and she's a product manager on quota, also for GCP. And it is 3:30, so we're getting to the end of the day. Try to bear with us, then we can all go grab a beer, have a little bit of fun after. The first thing I want to do is make a quick public service announcement. We're going to save some time at the end for Q&A. This is probably old hat by now, but we have a Dory Q&A tool, which you can find inside your Next app for this session. If you have questions as we go through the presentation, just add them in there or upvote the ones you're interested in, and we'll try to get to them at the end of the session. Awesome. So the first thing I actually want to do is get a quick sense for who's in the audience today. This will be my interactive portion of the presentation. Let's start off with an easy one. Raise your hand if you've made the switch to public cloud already. Okay, that's most of the audience, maybe like 80%. For the rest of you, maybe you haven't made the switch yet, but you're still considering. That's cool too. All right, put your hands back up if you've ever experienced a surprise on your cloud bill, either GCP or any of your other cloud providers. Okay, it's a higher percentage than makes me happy, but not surprising. All right, a trickier one. Raise your hand if you feel confident in your ability to monitor costs in the cloud. A much smaller number. How about if you feel confident in your ability to control your costs in the cloud? So to like actually put guardrails in place to protect yourself. I got one hand in the back. Thank you, sir. All right. So we're going to talk about that today. Hopefully we'll have a few more hands up on those questions by the end of the day. What we're going to talk about. What is financial governance? Kind of this abstract concept. We'll make it a little more concrete. We'll talk about why it's important and how you can kind of go about doing this on GCP with our tools. Some of you might work for larger companies where tinkering around in the console across 1,000 projects doesn't really scale well. So we'll talk about how to do this at scale using APIs. And we'll also sprinkle in some demos throughout the presentation. We have roughly ordered them in terms of increasing coolness. So stick around to the end because we're saving best for last. And I'm going to start with an anecdote about the opportunities and challenges of cloud and what this means for financial governance. So let's suspend disbelief and pretend we all work for Acme Company. Here is a cartoonish view of what our resource consumption might look like. We're a growing business, so our costs are trending up and to the right. And we have these seasonal fluctuations as our business demands change and contrast over the course of a year or a month. Now, back when we ran our own data center, we had to procure hardware ahead of time. We had to provision for the peak. We had to forecast our demand ahead of time, and that's represented by this dotted green line. And we don't have a lot of contrast in terms of color here, but I'll talk through it anyway. Sometimes we under-provision, right? And we can't serve all our customer demand. You can see our dotted green line is underneath our blue demand line. And then we have a degraded end consumer experience. Slow page load times, unresponsive applications, all bad news. Maybe we're even able to keep our core workloads up, but we have to restrict our developers' discretionary use, and that slows our time to market, also bad news. Alternatively, other times we over-provision, and now we have all of this wasted resources that are just sitting idle because we over-provision and we have too many servers. So we have a bunch of wasted cost, still bad news. Fast forward to today. We've moved on to public cloud, and now we're able to capture all these savings because we don't have to provision ahead of time. We don't have to provision for the peak. We have no more long procurement lead times, and we have no more wasted capacity like this. So this is the benefit of cloud, right? We just pay for what we need. And now when we have that unexpected spike in demand, we can scale up because of the elasticity of cloud. So that shaded yellow area represents something we wouldn't have been able to do before if we hadn't procured for it. But the flexibility that we get with cloud comes with a new challenge, which is all of a sudden we can serve demand that maybe wasn't as important for our business. Back with our data center, our costs were literally bounded by the physical servers we bought and put there and the software licenses we run on them. But now we can generate costs from anything that happens, right? One of my engineering teams could spin up a large-scale testing environment and forget to turn it back off. Or a business analyst on my team might write a bad query that performs a join on a really, really big data set and incurs a commensurately large BigQuery build. Raise your hand if you've seen one of these two things or something of the like. Yeah, you got some hands. I tend to write queries brute force trial and error, so I have personally had experience with the second one. So that brings us to the point of the session today. We're going to talk about how to get back in the driver's seat. Financial governance is all about making a plan and sticking to it. It's about avoiding surprises on your bill. It's about giving you the flexibility to scale to meet the demands of your business where you want to, where it adds value, and the control to restrict resources where it doesn't. So I'm going to read this quote. It comes from a Gartner study. I think it sums up the situation pretty well. 90% of the respondents to their survey agree that public cloud will save money for their organizations. However, few companies have implemented financial management processes for public cloud. Therefore, few have any idea whether they are achieving their goals. Think about that. It is pretty clear that there is a massive disconnect between what many of us know is important for our business and our ability to actually go achieve those goals. So, let's get back in the driver's seat. We're going to do that in 3 kind of simple steps today. We need to plan to make sure we know what our costs are expected to be moving forwards. We're going to monitor our costs against that plan, triage alerts, notify people who might want to go take action. And then we're going to actually go control our costs, put guardrails in place to protect ourselves from unexpected spend. First up is planning. It's the essential first step. And the way that we're going to do this varies a lot depending on what our organization looks like, what our processes are. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this particular step. But I am going to go over some of the tools that make this easier on GCP. So here I have a screenshot from our billing reports tool. You can find this in the billing console. And this is a fairly simple dashboarding UI that allows you to view your historical cost trends on GCP. This is actually an example from a large internal customer. And you can see some simple things here. Our costs are overall growing. And then about halfway through the chart, you'll see that there's this inflection point where the cost started to grow a lot more. And this actually happened because they launched a new feature that went viral with users. And all of a sudden, their costs started to grow with that new feature. And we can look at that new trend, forecast it forwards, and see, if business continues as usual, what are my costs going to look like over the next month, quarter, year? If I wanted to go into a little bit more detail, I could use the billing export. We'll pipe your data into BigQuery with a lot more granularity so you can look at things and slice it by region or label or even things like machine shape, get down to a really fine level of detail if it's important for my planning processes. And once I've accounted for my organic growth, there's some things that Google's just not going to know about. Like, let's say I'm going to launch a new application and I expect it to have 100 daily actives with, X footprint of storage and compute needs. I can make that capacity plan, but Google has no way of knowing about it ahead of time. Or maybe I'm going to launch into Europe and Asia for the first time, and I need to spin up new instances of my services in those new regions. Once I have that capacity plan, the Google Cloud Platform Pricing Calculator will help me turn that into a financial cost analysis that I can then build into my forward-looking forecast. But stepping back from tooling for a sec, regardless of whether you use GCP tooling or spreadsheets or some sort of third-party software, just remember to make cloud financial governance part of your financial planning process and whatever your regular cadence is, monthly, quarterly, annual, etc. So now that we have a well-reasoned financial plan, let's actually get to the interesting part. We need to put in place some monitoring so that we know when we're getting off track from that plan. So at this point, I'm tired of looking at slides. I hope you're tired of looking at slides. Let's actually hop into the console and start doing some demos. Awesome. So this is the budgets and alerts UI in the billing console. This is the kind of like the core toolkit that GCP provides you for monitoring your spend. And how it works is this. You'll create a budget once for the scope of spend that you care about. Let's say it's an application or a project. And then Google will, behind the scenes, monitor costs for you against that budget into perpetuity and let you know if you're getting off track from what you think is reasonable. So for the purposes of this demo, let's say that at Acme Company, we're launching a new application and we're calling it the Amazing Application. We think we know how many users are going to be on it. We think we know that it's going to cost about $1,000 per month. So now we'll create a budget to monitor that. I'll name it the Amazing Application Budget. Excellent. I think I've been frozen a little too long. Okay. There we go. I'm going to set it to monitor Phil's Amazing Application because I just want it to look after this one application. I don't want to dilute it with the spend from all of the other projects that I have running. And again, I'm going to give it a budget of $1,000 per month. So after I figure out and lock in how much I think I'm going to spend for this application, then I get to go set my alert threshold rules. And this defines the notification behavior that I want Google to follow. By default, we're going to alert you when you cross 50, 90, and 100% of that budget amount. So when the Amazing Application spends $500, we're going to send you your first notification. But in this case, let's say I don't actually want that. I want it to be a little more like my cell phone data usage plan. So I just want to know when I'm about to go over the budget. So I'll just keep 90% and 100%. And I'm actually going to add one more alert notification. And instead of triggering on actual spend, I'm going to trigger on forecasted spend. And I'm going to set that to 110%. So what that means is if I'm forecasted to go above my budget amount, even if it's early in the month, then I'm going to get an alert notification. So in this case, let's say I'm spending way more than expected. Pretty early on, we're going to let you know that you're off track to miss your budget, even if it's only, say, the third day of the month. Now I hit save, I lock that in as a budget, and you can see that here we now have the Amazing Application budget. It's configured. We've spent about $364 of our $1,000 budget for the month, so we're maybe roughly on track. I don't want to wait for us to get really close to the budget, so I'm actually just going to cut over back to the slides and show you what an alert notification would look like. So let's imagine the Amazing Application goes viral, and we have way more users than expected. All of a sudden, I get this alert notification in my inbox. It says, you are forecasted to spend more than 110% of your budget. In this case, it was for the month of March, because that was last month. So now I have this information, and I can go do something with it. I can have a conversation with my engineering team. Maybe our users are adopting faster than expected. Good news. I probably don't want to take any major action. Maybe I'll just increase the budget so I don't get this notification in the future. But maybe our user growth is not as fast as expected, and then I want to take some other sort of action. Which brings us to control. So far, all we've talked about is monitoring and planning, but we actually want to take some action to make sure that our costs don't go over budget in the first place. And the first thing we can do is kind of what I just described, right? Like we get an alert and signal, and we have to decide what to do with it. We triage that with the engineering team. We decide maybe we have some over-provisioned virtual machines, and we can go downsize those so that we save some money. Maybe our storage is growing faster than expected, and we want to migrate some of those objects over to cold line storage. We have some other tools at our disposal as well. Quota is a tool that allows us to throttle our resource consumption so that we actually rate limit how much our spend can increase moving forwards. And I'll let Aurelie talk more about that a little bit later in the presentation. Kind of the last biggest hammer in our arsenal is to actually remove billing from a project. So we can take a project, disable billing, and what that will effectively do is stop all costs from being accrued, but it will also immediately disable and delete all resources and workloads that are running in that project. So it's kind of an irrevocable decision, and it might be fitting in like a very discretionary dev project where the consequences of deleting stuff are not a big deal, and where people might be making more careless mistakes, and where it's just like an easy decision to make, so I'll just get it out of the way. But for something like a production environment, that could be a very costly decision. We probably wouldn't recommend that type of action. The other thing we can do is put guardrails in place proactively. So never let spend get out of control to begin with. And there's kind of two levers that we have at our disposal. One is resource restriction. Everything I just said on the previous slide, we can try to set that up to happen automatically before anything ever goes wrong. For more production-like environments, this is where we think about permission restriction as a better option, because we don't actually want to degrade an end consumer experience, but we do want to make sure that only a few authorized users are making changes. For the rest of the presentation, though, we're going to talk a little bit more about resource restriction in that dev test environment and talk about how to put automated controls in place to do this on your behalf. So the first way we can do this is with a last feature of budgets that I kind of glossed over in my previous demo called programmatic notifications. In addition to sending email alerts, we can also configure budgets to send programmatic notifications to a PubSub channel. So it will constantly, every 20 minutes or so, ping the budget status to this PubSub channel. And we can listen to this PubSub with a cloud function and automate any kind of logic we want. So one example would be, let's say when my dev project hits my $1,000 monthly budget, I actually want to go and stop all virtual machines from running. Like that was the discretionary budget. We've used it up. Let's stop spending money. And then if we need an override, come talk to me. We'll re-enable it. Or it just starts back up at the beginning of the next month. Who wants to see me actually try to do this right now? I got some hands. Yes, that's some mildly enthusiastic response I was hoping for. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to pop into a different billing account, my budget demo account, and create another budget. I'm going to call this one my next 19 budget demo and give it a $1,000 budget. I don't care so much about the alert email thresholds this time, but what I do want to do that's different is connect a PubSub topic. And you can do this down at the bottom of the Create Budget screen. All right, I'm going to set it to monitor or to post to the next 19 budget demo topic. And I'll save that. Okay, so now I have my next 19 budget demo, and it's going to send these budget status alerts to this PubSub channel. Right here, the next 19 budget demo PubSub channel. You'll notice that I have one thing subscribing to this PubSub channel right now, and that's a cloud function called GCF budget demo compute 2, next 19 budget demo. It's a long name, but I wanted it to be descriptive. And this is that cloud function that's listening to it. You can find all of this code in example demos in our technical documentation, so don't feel like you need to copy all this down. You can definitely find it online, but I'm going to walk you through what it does. So the first thing is I'm going to parse the PubSub payload to get the relevant information. Then, if I have not yet passed the 100% budget threshold, so if I'm still under my budget amount, I'm actually not going to do anything. As soon as I pass that threshold, though, that's when I start to take action. I'm going to authenticate with the Google Cloud APIs. I'm going to go get the list of running instances from GCE in that project. I'm going to stop the instances that are running in that project. And then, because my team really hates email and they really like Slack, I'm going to go post an update into their Slack channel and say, hey, I just shut down all your VMs, just so you know. Now, I also don't want to raid around for the rest of the month to pass my $1,000 budget. So we're going to fake it just for the demo. And I'm actually just going to post the same PubSub payload that our budget service would send so that we can fast forward a little bit here. Let's say I pass that 90% threshold. I've spent $900. When I send this message, nothing should happen. And if we go look at our GCE page, refresh, all the instances are still running, nothing's really happened. But then all of a sudden, we cross this 100% threshold. And when I hit this button, we should see a little more fireworks. All right. Let's go pop over, check our Slack channel. You can see, hey, we have a notification. The next 19 budget demo has exceeded 100% of the threshold. We've stopped 4 running virtual machines in the project. Sounds good. Let's see if it happened. And now you can see in that same project, we've terminated all the VMs. So at this point, if virtual machines are a big portion of our project costs, we've pretty effectively stopped a lot of the costs from accruing in that dev project, which is exactly what we wanted. And this all happened behind the scenes, automated. Once I set it up, this will just happen any month. We can just cut back over to the slides now. Okay, so that's programmatic notifications. And again, this is not necessarily the one action you want to take. It's more of a flexible framework that you can use to implement whatever logic makes sense for you, for your business, for your consumers within your organization. And now to talk a little bit more about some of the other methods you can use to control your costs actively on GCP, I'm going to hand it over to Aurelie.
Thank you. Thank you, Phillip. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about various forms of controls, and one of them is quota. So if you think about quota, you can think about a cell phone data plan. And here your quota would be the data plan limit that you set. So you can set quota on a select set of services, either at runtime, or you can do it at project creation time. So for example, say you're starting out with BigQuery and you expect a cost of about $100 per day on BigQuery. So now you know that if your query usage reaches like a cost of around $1,000 per day, then something weird is going on. So you can set a quota to provide guardrails so that it doesn't happen. And once you've set a quota, you can also create a quota alert to notify you just before you hit that quota limit so that you can set back the quota quickly in case the use is actually legitimate. So we're going to go ahead and also do a demo. So let me go ahead and right. So here we're going to illustrate what we've just talked about. So as you can see here, I'm in a Cloud Console for quota. And I've selected the service BigQuery. And we have a query usage per day that's unlimited by default. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set it to 1 terabyte. So I'm getting a message to confirm that I'm okay to reduce the quota limit by more than 10%. So I'm going to confirm that. And as long as the quota that is being reduced to the limit that's compared to the limit that's set by the service producer, in this case it's BigQuery, it should be pretty quick. So you can see here that it's been updated to 1 terabyte. If we look at our UI, you can see that it's actually already been updated. In reality, it takes a few minutes to update our servers globally. So I have a copy of this project where I've already set the limit to 1 terabyte. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that, in fact, I won't be able to run a large query that's over 1 terabyte. So here I have a large query, and I'm going to click Run. OK, I've probably set the result to be cached. So now I'm going to run it again, but it's not cached this time. So as you can see, I get a message that the quota has been exceeded for query usage per day. Now I'm going to go ahead and run another query, and this time it's a small query that's about 100 meg. So let's just make sure that I'm not using cache results, and we are going to run it. So, and this time, because the query is pretty small, it's under 1 terabyte, it's actually running successfully. So what we've done is we've just demonstrated that you can set guardrails with quota on the query usage per day that you can use. Now let's go back to the slides. So we've shown you how you can set quota to set guardrails on one project. We've shown you how we can set a budget on one project, also using the UI. Now, what if you had tens of projects where you need to set quota and budget alerts? In that case, going to the UI is no longer an option. So this is where you can use APIs to programmatically manage budgets and quotas. So we have two APIs here that are relevant. The first one is the budget API, and it's coming to alpha soon. And it will allow you to create and manage budgets with the same knobs that you're used to today in the UI. The second one here is the service usage API. It's already in alpha today, and it allows you to modify quota as long as it is below the default that is set by the service producers. So then what you can do is you can use your own tooling, so your own scripts, or use a deployment management tool to go ahead and create budgets and quota guardrails at project creation time. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a demo now to just show or illustrate what we've just talked about. And we're going to do it using the service usage API. And what we're going to do is every time we create a new project, we're going to put basic guardrails in place to control our BigQuery analysis cost. So we will create default policy to limit the BigQuery analysis to $1,000 per day, which equates to 200 terabytes in this case, in terms of query usage per day. So as you can see here, we're first creating a project. And then we're granting an existing service account. Is it here? Yeah. We're granting an existing service account called SU-quota, the service usage admin role, so it can actually change the quota on the target project. And then the last step is to set the BigQuery daily quota to 200 terabyte instead of unlimited. So you can see here that I'm setting the quota to 200 terabytes, and this is the quota that we are actually setting. So now I'm going to cut over to the demo, which is basically reusing this script. So more than I am. So you can see I'm creating a project. I'm granting the service account, the service usage admin role. I'm setting the BigQuery daily quota to 200 terabyte. And so I'm going to create a project called CST dev01. And right now it's creating it. And now I'm going to grant the role to the service usage admin role. You can see that. And then I'm going to set the quota to 200 terabytes. So now let's go ahead and take a look at our newly created project. So this is the project we've just created. And here we are looking at the Cloud Console for quota. And if we're looking at the query usage per day, it's been set to 200 terabytes. No, 20 terabytes, actually. I guess I didn't change it. It's 20 terabytes. All right. So that, let me see. Whoops. Yeah, you can see actually it was 20 terabytes, not 200. Anyway, so what I've just shown you is how to programmatically set the quota at project creation. And now this basically concludes the presentation. So I'm going to go and recap what we've talked about. So we've talked about what financial governance is and why it's important. We've talked about how to establish financial governance using cost management tools. And in particular, those cost management tools are budget and the associated alert notification for monitoring cost. And for reactive control, you can use the service-specific cloud consoles and APIs. And to proactively control your cost, you can use programmatic budget notifications in conjunction with the cloud functions. And you can also use quota to put in some guardrails.